and welcome to another episode of Horror Movie Night. This week, we are talking about Tucker and Dale versus Evil. I think I got that right. I keep this movie title right. and Todd versus
Tail
the book
and Ducker versus Evil.
Like they all bleed into my brain at once, and then I panic. This is this was a Scott pick?
Oh yeah, this is 100% my pick.
Okay.
Oh, Scott, yeah.
So Scott,
no, it wasn't painful to watch. It wasn't a Kyle pick.
No, that's true. That's true.
Fuck you.
Yeah. I mean, I totally get why you picked this. It's a classic movie. It's a great meta horror movie. I think the biggest thing that jumped out to me this time watching it, I've watched this movie probably like 6 or 7 times. This was a big like, oh, you haven't seen this yet? And then like making friends watch it because it's a crowd pleaser film. Man, the CGI moments in this movie do not hold up at all. Like
I don't think that even if we did this movie 13 years ago,
we'd be talking about
I think
it
we'd probably be like,
yeah.
the CGI is not great. Because that's the thing about bad CGI from the like early 2000s era is that it looked bad even back then.
Yeah.
You
and
know,
it's
like
frustrating.
we just let ourselves believe that it didn't look
Well,
bad.
I think there's an accessibility for like filmmakers on a lower budget to still tap into that stuff. So it's like you get more opportunities to see it, even though it's like, oh well, you still could only afford like this level of CGI and not like
what about the
CGI.
8 films to die for? I bet if we went back and watched any of those, they would look absolutely horrendous because they looked horrendous back then.
But I think what's egregious in this is like one of the 8 films that we did was Grave Dancers, which has a giant CGI head chasing people at one point.
Oh man,
like
perfect.
That's a great example. But I think what bums me out with this one is that like there are parts where I understand why you needed to use CGI on the low budget. What I don't understand is that like let's say the scene where he's telling the story of what happened 20 years ago or whatever, and the killer shoves a machete through the girl's throat. I understand that if you're on a short budget, a low budget, you can't really figure out the way to make that full effect work. But it's like
Sam Raimi could do it with $5.
Well, I was going to say, you could CGI the hand going into the throat, but then it should genuinely cut to a practical of, like, the machete coming out.
They did a lot of practical, too. So
they did do a lot of practical. They just lingered on too much CGI effects
and that kill happened. You see that kill twice, significantly. I mean, I definitely avoided thinking too much about that because I thought that was pretty bad, but I actually think that the weed whacker to the face was worse.
Yes.
But, I mean,
I also even think the CGI when the guy runs into the branch, like then it cuts. Does what I wanted it to do, which it's like it's just CGI for when he connects.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to the practical. But even that, the CGI through all of it is not great. But the premise of this movie is so fun.
It's so fun. It's so fun.
Yes.
I think, though, the opposite of last week, where last week I thought that the third act was the highlight of the movie, I actually think that this movie's third act is kind of where I lose steam for the movie because, like, it stops being fun once it turns into, like, the revenge and, like, the burnt-up serial killer teenager side of it.
Which love that we both had burnt-up killers in both
and it was the same. So I think that it was their left side. I mean, just coincidental there, guys.
Yeah.
I just... the first 2 acts of this movie where it's just a lot of fun horror tropes and mistaken identity is just so perfect. And I mean, how do you get out of that without it turning into a full-blown horror movie? It's kind of the same as Behind the Mask, where at a certain point...
Well, they were a lot more graceful in that movie. Because they could. I mean, it's just a completely different... I think that the storytelling devices that were used in that movie were just perfect for what they were going to do in the third act. But the thing I like about the third act in this is that it is fun. It's an add-on to the joke. To the jokes. You know, like I think that it still continues to plumb the depths of like hillbilly horror, you know, whatever you want to call that, you know, Hills Have Eyes worship. Appalachian worship. Yeah. Appalachian horror worship. So I think that there was still, you know, meat on that bone, if you will,
Yeah.
because of the whole. I mean, I've only seen this movie 3 times now. Kyle's now seen it twice. Matt's seen it, 7 or 8 times. So I guess that the difference is, how many times you've seen it. But for
Right.
me, I still found a lot of, because it's been probably a decade since I watched this movie. I think I watched it right when it came out, and then I watched it with Megan maybe a year later, and she saw just the tiniest little bit of me watching it, and she was like, "Is that Tucker and Dale?" Like the very beginning, I'm like, "Hell yes, Tucker and Dale. We're watching it for the show." So maybe it's the fact that I haven't seen it as many times as you, but I think that there were some fun things like when he does get suited up and they have that battle with the chainsaw and the lead pipe. It's very Motel Hell. And I think that it also continues the concept of Dale as a character. It because he isn't going to kill Chad.
Right.
He was just trying to incapacitate him so they could tie him up and then give him his inhaler. And I thought that was I never really thought that was such a great plan until now in this watch. But I just think that it's watching it in a little bit more critical eye. It really is kind of like it's showing that Dale really wouldn't hurt anybody, and I think that is also a little bit of the joke. Like it's kind of the final step of the joke.
Yeah, I agree, because I think that not for anything, but Tucker and Dale don't have character arcs, so to speak, and that's the whole point. They're not dumb by any means, but they're simple dudes who want to have this vacation home, right?
Yeah.
So
there's a character arc for Tucker. His vacation home gets blown up.
I mean, yes, relatively speaking. There's no they have to defend themselves, but there's no go out and get them or turn the world on its head. It's
right.
It's a little defense. It's a little bit be on the defense and make sure this house doesn't get burned down. Oh, sorry.
But the one thing I'll say that I would not say that this screenplay is as good as Behind the Mask, because it doesn't fit together like a puzzle. I mean, it's great. I love this movie, but the one thing that they didn't get to, maybe it's just in the cut that we have, but they are priming you for that cabin to be where the Memorial Day massacre occurred. And that because they that there were serial killer clippings on the wall and stuff, and Chad's sitting in the house of his father, I guess, and we don't really they kind of grazed that, and it would have been funnier if they would have had it be more because he goes insane and it's fine. I think that's a funny thing for Chad to do, but it would have just made a whole lot more sense for them to have it be in the cabin. The cabin should have been where they figured out that why did they have that paper on the top of a pile of papers in an old sawmill? It should have been in the creepy house, but not a big deal.
Yeah. No, I think that's the third act does sort of make me lose interest, even though everything leading up to that, even though they make the connections and tie everything together, everything leading up to that is sort of the same style of joke over and over again. But I think I didn't really get tired of it. I think that maybe I wonder if Matt got tired of it because it was the 7th, 8th time that he's seen it. But I thought that each time that happened, it was really fun, and I could have just watched that shit keep happening.
Yeah, I wish there were more kids to die in funny ways.
I wish there were more kids
well, that's what I mean. It's
how do you come to the thought process of these kids are killing themselves?
Chad's great, and I think that he's the perfect villain for this, right? But I was just having so much fun.
Yeah,
it's just so fun.
That first hour is so masterfully done. From the first second that they drive past the kids in the car, and they're just looking out the window, but it's shot in the slow motion where they look imposing, or the "We got your friend."
My God.
Why is that not on a shirt? This movie has been forgotten.
My immediate thought was, why is it not on a shirt?
We got your friend. Him running with the bees, when he cuts
Yeah, and he's like, that kid must have been just as allergic as me or something like that. It was
Like,
so good. But Kyle, I did hear a little.
Yeah, I heard a psst. Like someone was whispering to me about their thoughts of the movie.
All these guys wanted to do was be on vacation in their vacation home, so I'm drinking a beer called Vacation Lee.
Oh, perfect.
Double IPA from my public house. And I burst out laughing at the start of this because I saw Scott grab a little something.
I have moonshine.
Moonshine.
Now, my dad gave me this jar of moonshine like 5 years ago. And for the people that are not in the Patreon, patreon.com/HMN podcast, if you want to watch us discuss these movies. But yeah, like in 5 years, I think that this has evaporated more than I've drank it. There's about an inch and a half that's down from the top. I don't like it, but I like it better than PBR because I'm not going to bring that swill into my home.
That's where I almost went too, and that PBR went to go.
We would have been perfect. Also, like, it would have been amazing if when Dale brings him the PBR at the end when Tucker is in the hospital, if he like poured it on his head, he's like, I hope you feel better now. It wouldn't have been in Dale's personality, but it would have been funny.
But I would have liked it.
So the director of this movie he made one other movie 7 years after the fact. He made Little Evil, which was starring Adam Scott for Netflix. Kind of a Nepo baby. He's the son of Sally Field. So
whoa.
I remember that was like a thing that Jonathan would bring up where he's like, I like that movie, but I can't stand him talking at panels about how hard it was to raise money for the movie. It's like your mom was Sally Field and you needed $5 million. Like how difficult exactly was it?
He needed to do this movie and he goes, Mom, I need to do this movie. And she's like, go to your room. I care about his schooling.
So apparently they were attempting to do a sequel, and I just pulled this up because I was like, I remember hearing that they wanted to do a sequel for years. I never knew what happened.
Did you talk about it on the panel?
So they talked about it a couple times on panels.
Okay.
So it said that in an interview with Choice Cuts, director Eli Craig expressed his thoughts on doing a sequel called Tucker and Dale Go to Yale, and described it as Good Will Hunting meets the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Wow.
In that same interview, he also said that Alan Tudyk had an idea to do the sequel that would be similar in the tone of From Dusk Till Dawn, which, I mean, if Tucker and Dale end up fighting vampires, for sure. So here's where the latest updates are. Horror Hound Weekend 2014 cast members Tyler Labine and Alan Tudyk confirmed that the sequel was in development. In 2016, they revealed that they were still actively developing the project, but they had other commitments. But when asked about the status of the sequel at Boston Comic-Con in 2017, Alan Tudyk said the script was written and it was very disappointing and we will probably not move forward.
Bummer. They look like they're having so much fun.
They look like they're having a blast.
The fucking best time. I would love a sequel, but I just don't. I think like, the time is.
I want a
neither of those
pitches
sequel. Really
got
I want the
me Behind the Mask
excited.
prequel. It's not going to happen.
Dude, before I was,
that was one of the most upsetting Kickstarters ever. Was how little anybody cared about the Behind the Mask sequel.
I gave them money, and I think
that thing hit like 20% of its goal. Like it was so.
Yeah. I must have never gotten charged for it because I sure don't remember getting any perks. Because I think that they were going to do like it was going to be a Before the Mask movie and comic book, but if they didn't hit the thing, they were still going to do the comic book. But I never saw the comic book. I think they did actually come out with the one though, right?
I don't remember if they came out with a comic. I feel like I can see a comic type thing, but I might just be thinking about that. Maybe it was a Justin Osborne poster.
Yeah. So I'm reading about the sequel on the Wikipedia page right now, and the most recent thing that they had in there, which I believe was still before the Kickstarter failed, but it said in early 2017, director Scott Glosserman explained that the script for the sequel had become dated due to the change of horror over the intervening years.
Yeah.
And he said the script itself was capturing the mid-aughts period in the midst of torture porn and found footage genres. It had a lot of interesting things to say. Today, that script for that film would almost be like a period piece, and I don't necessarily want to bring it up to current day. But certain things might just feel too old depending on how you look at it.
Can I say how you solve that?
How?
Yes.
So you just make whether it be Shudder or Screambox or a fictional version of that, you just make that exist in this world, and you make a Shudder exclusive that is Before the Mask.
Yeah.
You make this whole and fucking you put Joe Bob in it for why the fuck not? Like, you can do all these things. I'll talk to Scott.
Yeah, just treat it. Yeah, just treat it like a
right
lost
here.
film that he discovered.
I mean, there's ways around it, but it's also it's got to be tough when you write and put all your energy into this whole thing and the tides completely change and you know that it's not coming back. And he went on to go do other things. I think he created this thing called Gather, which was a way for people to gather particular films either online or into their local theaters. Like, he had other ventures that he went off to do, but man, before
it must suck to do like To Kill a Mockingbird of slasher movies, where it's like that book, Harper Lee never wrote another novel because she could not fucking top To Kill a Mockingbird. And so, I mean, I'm not saying that Behind the Mask is a perfect movie, but I think that it is damn close as far as slasher pastiche meta movies that aren't Scream. You know, like, it's about as close to perfect as you can get without being Scream.
It is. I completely agree. Tucker and Dale has a little bit of that.
Yeah.
I will say I do love, and I don't think that, I mean, because here we got all the Wrong Turn movies. We don't get a ton of Mountain Man stuff, just for lack of a better term, you know. So, but the trope that they play into plays so well. Oh yeah. You know, because I think something like Deliverance obviously had set the stage
Just
for
Before
that.
Dawn.
Right, yeah, there are a handful that make the common language that we had talked about, you know, like they exist. But I also love how just real people they are. They are just people that want to have this vacation home, that they've invested their time and their money, and they're gonna fucking do it. Okay, they're gonna do it.
This particular movie, though, I mean, this is probably the best example of Tyler Labine just should be so much more well-known than he is.
It's not fucking fair.
It's criminal.
And he's so sweet, too.
He's so sweet. He's so funny. And he's so good. He's so good at playing the everyman.
Yeah.
And
I thought that what was the Ghosts movie? The Ghost.
Oh my God, the Ghost show he did was great. Deadbeat. I thought that Meg and I watched that every week when it dropped or whatever for the multiple seasons, and could have sworn that was going to be his springboard into regular work, not regular work as in non-genre work, but rather seeing him regularly. Probably
in stuff
across
medium. Embarrassingly, probably the most mainstream successful movie he is a lead in is the first Escape Room movie.
Really?
And I
heard those movies are fun.
Escape Room 1 is a blast.
Jeanette, said it was fun.
I
did not know he was in it.
We need another 6 years, and then we'll watch the first one. But
yeah, all right, we'll put it on the calendar.
Hey, do you have an idea for a podcast but don't know where to start? Or do you have an already existing podcast that you want to take to the next level? Well, check out WeKnowPodcasting.com. From concept development to theme music to editing to logos, WeKnowPodcasting.com is a one-stop shop for all things pod. Don't hesitate to hit us up. We're very nice.
I mean, I think we've said all that we really need to say about Tucker and Dale. The guy, go see it. Tucker and Dale versus Evil. If you haven't seen it, it's great. Scott,
so fun.
What would you double feature this with?
Well, you know, I've been saying Behind the Mask a lot, and I probably would if I was, really sitting down to watch an actual double feature. But for the premise of this show, I'm gonna go with Cabin in the Woods, because Behind the Mask is a meta slasher. And, it's commenting on slasher movies, and Cabin in the Woods is commenting on Cabin in the Woods movies, which I think this has a little bit more in common with. So,
all right, fair. How about you go, fun.
Kyle? I was going to say Behind the Mask, too, and we've talked about it probably just as much as we talked about Tucker and Dale on this episode. So I'm going to go Wrong Turn 2. The more bombastic and fun one and gorier one of the series. it's in the woods. It's fine.
What about you, Matt?
I'm
Kills enough people.
gonna literally do the same double feature that I did like 5 weeks ago when we did Broken Lizard, Club Dread, and say you might be the killer.
It's so
just
good.
another great it's so hard to do what I would consider a good meta horror film. So this is a good one. Behind the Mask is a good one, and I think You Might Be the Killer and Cabin Fever are the other two. Just like
I got a
pitch
lot of
perfect,
Cabin Fever
undeniable.
vibes from this.
Or Cabin in the Woods.
lot.
Cabin in the Woods, like you said, but yes, Cabin Fever. I
Cabin
think had to have
Fever
been an
had-
influence on.
They
us,
were
but
because there's a pancake joke.
yes,
That had to have been a nod.
The pancake joke was too that's the first time I caught it because I must have seen this before Cabin Fever, surprisingly. Which is I didn't give two fucks about Cabin Fever.
I've watched it for the show and with Eric J.
with
Brown.
Eric J.
He
Brown
picked
from
that.
last
We were
week.
just talking about him
he,
from last
he
week.
did that to us. So Scott, what thing have you read, watch?
So
listen
I
to?
just want to. So I watched Shazam: Fury of the Gods. I didn't really. I mean, it was fine. But it just didn't really have the panache of the original of the first movie. Plus, Zachary Levi gives me the ick now. But the movie that I was going to discuss last week because it's about killer animals. But I decided that I was going to end our summer up with some pop punk recommendations. But I watched Fangs from 1974 because it dropped on Shudder. And
that's the snake one.
yeah, it's the snake one.
Yes. Oh my god, I haven't finished it. I can't wait to hear what you say.
Surprisingly fun. It's so outside of my horror wheelhouse, but it is charmingly silly.
All right.
Absolutely. I think the gas station attendants, right? Aren't they?
No, it's the
aren't
corner
they
store.
brother and sister.
Yeah,
Corner
they're
store,
brothers, but they're
excuse
like
me.
incestuous brother and sister.
Yeah,
I
dude.
can't even take it seriously, thankfully, because
I
it's
just
like
fell
very
into my
uncomfortable.
Thankfully.
Oh wow!
I just fell into my boo.
How about you, Kyle? What is the thing you want to talk about?
Again, I'm between these two shoots, so my watchability of anything is so limited. I was watching like RuPaul's All Stars, like I was watching all this shit. But to sort of piggyback off of Scott from last week, I'll just tell you about an album that dropped that I really really like, and it's actually a remastered album plus a bunch of demos and re-recordings and stuff like that. And I just regardless of who it is, I just have to say that if an artist can do that, if you love that artist, if you like any of their music, like dig into that shit. Because so the artist is Lady Lamb, and she put out a album probably 10 years ago called Ripely Pine, but even almost 5, 6, 7 years before that, she was just recording demos and putting them out and doing small EPs and whatever, right? But if you put out an album, the album's really well received. You put out more albums after that, and you gain a following. And then this is like a revisiting of that album with remastered tracks plus like different takes or alternate versions of that. And I just I don't know. If there's an artist, more than just the album itself is the concept. For anybody who is a music lover, if you can find an artist or if you have an artist that has done that, because there's enough that have explored their own music. If there's an artist that does that, listen to it. It's so exciting to sort of hear her revisit tracks and revisit these songs that not only were on this first album, but were performed and played and thought of when she was 15 years old and beyond. It's just so cool. I've been really listening, sometimes there's stuff that you put on because you just want to know what it sounds like. I've been actually listening to it, and it's been really fun.
Nice.
I love that for you.
Yeah. Thank you, Scott.
Very nice. So I read a book on the flight home. Well, actually, I read most of it in the airport waiting to board my flight. And it was a book called Punk USA, The Rise of Green Day and the Rise and Fall of Lookout Records. And it's just a maybe 250-page max oral history of the Lookout Records and the influence that it had. at first I was like, man, I don't know about you guys. I hate oral history books where it's just like nothing but a good time. About 80s hair metal is a prime one where it's like,
yeah,
it'll be a paragraph about what that chapter's about, and then it's just quotes from people.
Yeah, that's
for
not
like
my thing.
pages.
Yeah, like I think that the Legs McNeil with "Please Kill Me" sort of like straddles that line, and that's probably as far as I go because other shit like that, it's like not. I don't want to like be a shithead, but it's also like I could go on Wikipedia. I could just go on Wiki, and that's not what I want to do.
So what I liked about this one that made it such an easy read is that it's like he is writing a book about Lookout Records, and the quotes are supplemental things to tie his paragraphs together. So I don't think there's a single part in the book where one person's quote is followed by another person's quote. Like, it's like, here's a quote from Ben Weasel. Here's insight on what Ben Weasel is referencing, and this is what's going on. And it's literally just written in order of albums released and, like, what was happening behind the scenes at Lookout Records and, like, how was this really magical place. And, like, the short version of it is essentially everyone kind of knows the story. Like, Lookout Records was this small distribution label. Green Day gets signed and becomes, like, the biggest band in the world, which makes all these people look at their first two albums, and they're buying these two albums, and they're getting an influx of money. But, like, where the problem was that the label was spending it like that would never run out. But, like, at a certain point, there's only so many new Green Day fans every year. So, like, the sales of those albums kept trending downward, but they kept just signing bands and giving them money and then realizing that they had kind of put themselves in a debt. And what had ultimately killed them was that they put themselves in so much of a debt that they stopped paying the royalties to Green Day for the sales of those records that were coming in.
Oh boy. Boy.
And that essentially ends up killing the label. But it's kind of interesting reading a book where, like, you walk away from it and think this label, these dudes must have been solid dudes, because even the guys who kind of got fucked over, like, they're like, there was absolutely no malice in anything that the guys who ran Lookout did. Like, everyone speaks so highly about them. And there was actually something that jumped out at me, and I wrote it down because I wanted to remember it for my future, was that the first band that they ever had to send a contract to, their lawyer was like, you have to send a contract. Like, you can't just do these handshake deals. Like, that's going to come back and bite you in the ass. So when they made their contract for Lookout Records, and this was until the very end, every one of their contracts ended with, over and above all of the preceding agreements, the two parties agree to work together in the spirit of mutual respect and friendship to the mutual benefit, and to resolve any differences and concerns in the most positive way from here on moving forward. And I was like, I love that sentiment of being like, we are going to put in writing in this contract that we will do everything in our power to make sure that this contract does not affect our friendship and our respect towards each other as human beings.
Love it.
So I was like,
I love that.
I wrote that down. I'm like, if there's ever a point where Geekscape has to start sending contracts to the podcasters, I insist that this verbiage verbatim appears in that contract.
Amen.
Like, yes. But that was Tucker and Dale versus Evil, as picked by Scott. Next week, something else is going to verse something else in Kyle's pick. So stay tuned for that.
Matthew!
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.